Thank you. I can confirm you're live on YouTube.
Right, good afternoon, members. We are now live on YouTube. The first item of business is to appoint a chair for the meeting. Do we have any nominations, please? Sorry, just to confirm, is that Councillor Parish proposing and Councillor Bondi seconding? Yep. Do we have any other nominations? No, all agreed? Okay, I'll hand over to Councillor Long.
Thank you very much for that. I've got still the agenda open from CPP rather than the one I should be on, so that's a operator error from my part. So I'll be with you very briefly with those documents. Joint panel. There we go. So the next item of business is to appoint a vice chair for the meeting, and from the chair I'd like to propose Councillor Sandra Collop. All those in agreement? Agreed. Thank you. Apologies for absence, please, Becky.
Chair, I've had apologies from Councillors Colwell and Councillor Rives.
Thank you. And members present under Standing Order 34. Obviously, we've got Councillor Collingham joining us remotely on the remote meeting, so she's Standing Order 34. Any others in the room?
Councillor Everett and Councillor Rose.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Thank you, Councillor Everett. It was good to see you both. Members' declarations of interest, and I have advice from Alexa that if you're a member of either of the or any of the panels that are being discussed tonight, obviously we're all in the same boat as far as that goes, so there's no declarations declaring on that score. Is that correct? Yeah, so any separate declarations of interest for the items on the agenda? No. In which case we'll move straight over to main substantive item for this joint meeting, which is scrutiny governance arrangements. So Alexa, if you'd like to outline the proposal, please.
Yes, Chair, and I do have a very short, as in 10-slide presentation, just to very quickly go through. But before I'll share my screen shortly. If I can just direct members to the papers, just to make sure you've got everything in front of you. So there's the agenda pack with the report, which commences on page 11, and then there is the appendix starting on page 16, which is the scrutiny executive protocol. Then there's a longer form presentation that was published, and that's separate to the whole agenda pack. So just if anyone's got access on their iPad, I think I can see a lot of laptops and iPads around. You would just need to go back a step to access appendix 2 there. So I'll just share my screen. I think I'm leaving, Becky. Begin. There we go. Oh, yeah. So over the summer, we've been busy with a fun summer job, which was conducting a review of our scrutiny structure, and that actually animated, I don't know if the word, from the peer review that I think many of you will recall back in 2023, the LGA peer review, and the 8th recommendation in that peer review was to conduct a governance review, and there was feedback provided that they specifically noted the fact that we had 3 panels. They found that to be effectively overkill, and that they would be expecting for a council of our size to actually have 1. They found they did attend a joint panel meeting, and it was in the assembly room, and I can't remember the item on there, but they did provide feedback about the structure, and it was difficult to tell who was a panel member, who was the executive, and they struggled to follow the order of the proceedings. So we needed to do this. So we got this kicked off, and it was very much to look at the structure and whether something different was needed. But as stated on that slide there, the drivers around that review were very much about how we could focus scrutiny on strategic issues that would add value to the work that they were looking at. To pick up on your policy review and development function, it was absolutely identified that a driver for this review was how we can improve that function and get you looking at policies in their development stage rather than them coming to you as a fait accompli. We need to adopt it. Here's the final version. And then, strategically looking at, at what is effectively annual plan setting and actually looking forward, looking at the corporate strategy, transformation programme, major projects programme, and actually thinking at the beginning of a year, what do we want to look at? And as ever, how we can maximise the function of providing that constructive and critical friend challenge. And how we can increase and maximise officer support and regular training for members. So those were the overriding drivers for the review. And as stated, you've got the full summary, so you've got the full outcome presentation within your agenda pack. So I'm not going to go through that in detail. This was the outcome of that survey, that review that we undertook. So as part of that, we carried out a survey, and the outcome of that survey, which was just one element of the review, was a general leaning towards preserving the status quo. When we looked at benchmarking, though, and what other councils are doing, and certainly our neighbours in Norfolk, we are significantly out of step with what other councils are doing. Most councils either have one panel, but they are meeting around 10 o'clock or 2 p.m. Or 10 in the morning or 2 p.m. Or they have that split between the scrutiny function and then the policy review and development function. And that was across the board in Norfolk. And then I also looked across the border at Fenland and South Holland as well. We met with chairs and group leaders and previous chairs as well, and there was a strong outcome from those sessions of recognising that there needed to be a change. Whether that was a change to the meeting structure, was up for debate, but absolutely in terms of the added value and the impact and the training and the forward planning was absolutely identified with chairs, and that recognition of member and officer time really is finite. It's not a never-ending resource. For you guys to come out tonight and sit in this room, this is your time and you planned for this, and that's what you're taking your evening and the time to do. So if you're going to be sat here, what is it that you're going to be looking at, and what added value are you going to be providing for that? And particularly with LGR on horizon and where that will be going, and what the legacy will be for this council, and in terms of the work to be done before that takes effect, there's a real focus on how we can make the work strategic. I'll move on to a gap analysis, but ultimately the conclusion of the review that was undertaken was that structure changes are needed to provide an improved scrutiny function. And that gap analysis that I mentioned just there, I'll just run through these. So scrutiny is not just about scrutinising ourselves. It's also about looking out to our partners and stakeholders and connected agencies and particularly those that have outcomes that are linked to the work that we do, and scrutinise what they're doing, how that impacts on our policy framework and the work that we are doing, and the service delivery around that. And I think there was a very good example recently of the transport informal working group, the Transport Strategy Informal Working Group. That was a fantastic example. But apart from that, there hasn't been a great deal of sort of external scrutiny, and then using that to develop policy or propose policies from the back of that. That links into the policy review and development function. You know, it's really you know, at the foothills of what it could be in terms of having that early engagement on policy review and development. And then, as I said, I've touched on it, it's the training, it's the forward work programming, it's that strategic element that what you're looking at is worth your while, because it is actually going to have an impact. It's not just purely operational and service delivery and kind of run-of-the-mill things that you're looking at that come around all the time. They are actually going to have a strategic impact on the direction of the work of the council. And then just some practical realities of what we can do to actually put that into place, and how we can have some pre-meet briefings, workshops, bringing in the concept of a scrutiny officer that we don't have at the minute. And that scrutiny officer would very much be that conduit between the executive and the scrutiny function, to make sure that those communication channels are there and properly working. So 4 options were formulated as a result of the review. First one, which is the recommendation that's before you this evening, it's moving to a 2-panel model, but actually doing that in 2 stages. So the first stage would be in this municipal year to have an immediate change, and that change would be to merge E&C and R&D into 1 panel. It would be a complete merger. There would be nothing lost from any of that. And if the name is just, you know, regeneration and community, that's up for grabs. It could be, you know, whatever members would like to call it, it could be called. But the remit and the terms of reference would be fully merged together. There would be no losses there in terms of the work that that panel would cover. And the reason for this would be to create space and space for that training and all the workshops that I mentioned about annual forward work plan setting, and strategically looking at what do you want to look at in 26, 27 that is going to actually add value and real strategic impact to what the council does, and to feed that to cabinet. That will allow some time to build that into. And then the second stage would be the 2-panel model that would be adopted, which is for corporate performance panel to become the primary internal scrutiny panel. They would be doing all of the pre-decision scrutiny and post-decision scrutiny of executive decisions, primarily cabinet decisions, but would also be the inward-facing scrutiny panel, so on budget performance, or performance against the budget, obviously KPIs, all the normal things that corporate performance are already doing. So there would, apart from the fact that corporate performance would be getting all of the cabinet reports, and when I say all, I mean, as it would, the 2-panel model, the second panel would not be receiving cabinet reports as part of pre-scrutiny. But what one of the outcomes of this process that we're seeking to achieve is to understand and to bed in that scrutiny don't have to see every single executive decision that is being made. There should be that strategic analysis of why do we want to see it, what outcome will come from this, what value can we add to this process. If it's purely sort of an administrative policy process that's very statutory, regulatory driven, and there's really not much that can be done about the policy that's there or the decision that's going to be made, and it isn't really fundamentally linked to the corporate strategy and direction, you know, it's having that inward challenge on yourself to say, okay, why do we need to see this? You know, is our time better spent focused on other areas where we can really make a difference and impact? So CPP will be covering all of that work, and then the other panel, which will come on to the proposed name, but like I say, that's completely up for grabs, would be there for that external scrutiny. And we'll come on to a slide where I've just done an indicative annual forward work programme, so you can see the kind of thing that panel would be looking at. But they would also be looking at and undertaking that policy review and development function. B, the second option there, that's actually a 2-panel model, but just a 1-stage approach. So we forget about the merging during this municipal year, and we just focus on adopting a 2-panel model in May next year, annual council. And what I should just note here as well, that it is intended that we would drop the concept of joint panels, because there would be a complete separation of functions from what CPP, or the new CPP, would be doing, and then the new external facing panel would be doing. And then there is absolutely the option to consider of having 1 panel. But I think when members might remember, we were looking at meeting timings around COVID a few years ago. I think our demographic of councillors are absolutely, we have a higher demographic of working councillors, and I would expect that if we did move to a 1-panel model, if we still had to do late starting meetings, which most Norfolk authorities, or most councils who have a 1-panel model, they are normally starting earlier in the day. I think that would present some challenges in terms of the amount of work to get through if you're starting somewhere between 4 and 6 in the evening. So that one was discounted on that basis. And then equally, an option is to make no changes and just leave it as it is, and leave that in situ till LGR takes effect. As I've already run through there, so we'll skip over this one. The recommendations that are before you today for your consideration are to do that 2-panel model on a 2-stage process. So merge R&D and EC now, and the reason for that is to create some space for bedding in that training and the annual work programming and doing all of that sort of the soft skill development around this that we want to do. And just creating some space for that. And then annual council adopt the new model, and then also within your papers, as I mentioned, is a new and revised scrutiny and executive protocol, which touches, because that is a constitutional document and touches on some of the outcomes from the review in terms of the impact of scrutiny. I've touched on this as well in terms of what is the actual rationale for why we're saying to you, let's change, because, you know, a perfectly fair challenge back would be why, you know, what's the reason? You know, we know the context we've got and what's on the horizon. You know, it's working, you know, it chugs along, so what's the problem? I think one of the responses to that would be that, yes, LGR is happening. We don't know if it's going to be a 1, 2 or 3 yet, but what we absolutely know is that for those members that transfer, and well, not transfer, but for those members that are elected into a new authority, there will be other members from other authorities that have also been elected. There will no doubt be new councillors that have no experience whatsoever, but there will be a differential gap between our members and what they're used to in terms of scrutiny, and how they expect and understand scrutiny to go, and all the other Norfolk authorities that have served a term of office before. And remember, you know, if for those that are elected into the new authority, you'll be the experienced ones, because there no doubt will be a raft of new councillors as well. So you'll be, you know, you'll be looked to provide that guidance and experience. And the concern the concern, but perhaps the opportunity of what we have now is to upskill and get all of our members into the same space as other Norfolk members. So that's, yeah, this again is just touching on the fact that panel 2 would be very much around that stakeholder external reviews. And when I say stakeholders, there is a definition in Appendix 2. I don't think I put it into the slides, but there is a definition there. But you're talking, it's the police, it's the hospital, it's your housing associations. You know, it's not limited to public sector organisations, but it's those organisations that the work they do and the outcomes of the work they do has an impact noticeably directly on our residents and is connected to the work that we do. So I've just very indicatively, this is just totally made up about half an hour ago. But if you were going to look at what you might like to do, if you were going to move to this, oh, and I missed something very important, which was the name. And again, to stress, this is just draft, and all suggestions are welcome. But we've for that second panel, we've indicatively called it the Strategic Policy and Stakeholder Performance Panel. Not incredibly catchy, but if anybody has got any other suggestions, do put them forward. But that's ultimately what the panel would be doing. So this is just totally indicative. 6 meetings a year, you alternate. And when I say this about annual forward work programming, the benefit that you will get as members and panels from doing this work in around about March, April every year is you're going to be sitting down and you're going to be speaking to CLT, you're going to be speaking to Cabinet, and you're going to be working out where are the actual real areas of strategic focus for the council. And you're going to then be having workshops and assessing, right, okay, this year, what are we going to look at that is going to actually add value and impact to what the work of the council is? And then if you select some items and indicatively pick one, what I'll call a deep dive per meeting, what that does is enables CLT and the officer support teams to forward plan and to get into their work streams that they know that they need to do the work that the panel wants. So, you know, it's not a sort of a knee-jerk reaction to say, okay, CPP's asked for this and someone's got to get it into their diary that they've got to produce this report, and then it's all a very knee-jerk reactive process. This will be at the beginning of the year. Officers and CLT will understand these are the deep dive areas that scrutiny are looking at, who's doing that work, who's preparing it, who's supporting the panel. So yeah, like I said, totally indicative. Meeting 1, housing delivery policy. It's in the transformation programme. We know that's due to come through. Getting that early input from the panel rather than seeing something, as I said, fait accompli at the end. And having that real member input on that front would be the first one. Then the next one, do a bit of external scrutiny with the hospital. Meeting 3, Marmot Place, you know, massive strategic elements to that project there, and really exciting things that could be done with policy review and development about there. Get in there early and say you want that input and you want that officer support around that. Meeting 4, it's actually a statutory requirement, crime and disorder, do that external scrutiny. Meeting 5, you look at, you know, environmental, you know, a really deep dive on environmental factors and policy development. And then meeting 6 would be Freebridge. And then, as members will see in the pack, you've got a revised scrutiny and executive protocol, and it's probably worth just drawing some attention to what the Local Government Act 2000 says about scrutiny, overview and scrutiny. It was that act that introduced it, and the explanatory notes to that piece of legislation really just says everything really that you need to know about what the intention of scrutiny is. And it really, for those of you that remember, there was the committee structure before 2000, and every council was a committee structure, and everything was done through a committee for all decision making. The concept of a cabinet in local government just didn't exist. That wasn't a thing. And it was widely recognised in the review that was undertaken, was that led to very slow, very clunky decision making, and that actually a lot of the time decision making was undertaken behind closed doors with no transparency or accountability, because it was recognised it would take so long to get, you know, the most basic of decisions through. So that Local Government Act 2000 brought in the concept of a executive cabinet model, and that there can be up to 10 councillors on cabinet who would have this executive function and decision making powers. But as the counterbalance to that, because it was very much recognised that that was putting quite a lot of decision making power in a group of 10, up to 10 people, the counterweight to that would be scrutiny. And that was very much explicitly set out in the legislation, that is to hold the executive to account. So the executive is there to implement and deliver against the budget and policy framework, and then overview and scrutiny committees are charged with holding the executive accountable for that implementation, and that is in the legislation. And then within those explanatory notes, it also just throws in actually also that they're also envisaged that they would, and this is the word, they say advise the executive on council and council on policy development. So it is very much a collaborative role there, rather than the critical friend challenge role that comes with scrutiny. And then we've just got a bit within that protocol. It's pages 16 to 19 of the agenda packs. I did, when I've reflected and gone back through it, seems to be very bullet point heavy. If I just do something to maybe look at the format going forward of it, but it wouldn't be to change the content of it. But it's very much focus on trying to do some, you know, do's and don'ts. You know, what the scrutiny function will do and what it won't do, and what the executive will do and what it won't do. But this is ultimately what scrutiny is there for. It's for the accountability element, constructive challenge, policy development, performance oversight, bringing in that community voice and residents' perspectives, and that kind of deep dive policy development role it can play, and then that transparency and learning. And then just in conclusion, I'm just bringing it back to the reasons and the drivers behind conducting the review in the first place, which was to really look at how we do scrutiny, and is that the best structure for what we're trying to achieve in the public interest. And yeah, the conclusion that we came to is that we do need a change. And the recommendations are before members in terms of ultimately moving to a 2-panel model. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexa. It's not often that we look at how our scrutiny arrangements work. Over the years that I've been here, yes, the cabinet system had started then, as you wondered, but yes, it had been. And the way scrutiny is done, and the evolve in, you know, where the panels have evolved over time, that has changed over time. But we had a cabinet only scrutiny committee that's when I was first elected. It was very confrontational. The characters involved were very politically opposed from one another, and yes, it was interesting times. The peer reviewers looked at what we're doing now, the system that we've got now, and suggested that we need to do things better, and there's different thinking out there that has evolved over time in the same way that our system that we've got has evolved over time. So I think what I'd like is soundings from panel members on their thoughts, any questions or comments about either the practicalities of one against another and so on. Obviously, we've got to judge it against ticking the box for making the peer review worthwhile and relevant, because, you know, if someone comes along and reviews you and says something's not really as good as it ought to be, we've got to be able to justify. If we say, well, no, we just want to keep it how it is, thank you very much, because ultimately they picked up that for a reason, and it may just be that they attended a joint panel on for a particularly bad night to assess the way that we work. Whether therefore a knee-jerk reaction is that we change everything, I don't know. We have to sort of countenance that and at least have a position that we need to hold on it. So we've got already one or two people who indicate they want to speak. I'll do committee members first, and then after that we'll go to standing order 34 people. Are you getting all these? Yes. Hands going up all over the place. I've got my vice chair on this because I knew there'd be a lot of hands all at once. How are we getting on?
Yeah, I've got your phone.
You got one? Yes. Right. The order that is emerging starts off with Councillor Bearshaw, Councillor Kemp, Councillor Sayers, Councillor Bone, Councillor Ware, Councillor Parish, Councillor Radcliffe, Councillor Coons, Councillor Dipapani. I nearly could have gone around the entire room, couldn't I?
Yeah,
but starting first, very early on, Councillor Bearshaw, hot off the mark. Well done. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just hopefully want to add some useful context. So when I was chair of R&D, really early doors, I felt a couple of reports, a couple of agenda items were going to different meetings rather than what should have come to R&D. So I set up, as you well know, the joint chair panel meeting, and that worked really well. But month after month, we were always scrabbling for enough work to make it a worthwhile panel meeting. And there were occasions when we actually cancelled the panels. So for anyone thinking, oh, this is too much to go to 2 panels, I just want to lay that for you. 2 panels certainly feels about right for the amount of work we were getting. The other thing, and I know we've had this discussion a few times, is the officers pour their lives into these reports and bring them to the panel sort of completed, at which point we rip them to shreds. And it never feels like a nice thing to do. So one thing I was always trying to push R&D was to get the reports early. And shape them as opposed to criticise them. So I think that's one thing that we need to be mindful of, and hopefully get the scrutiny panels to that position, or one of at least. When you went through the examples, and I get there were only examples talking about what sort of the 6 meetings and what they'll look at, I think rather than be over descriptive with what each meeting will look at, would probably just be effectively put that in the terms of reference for that committee, and then let the chair, similar to what we do now, pick that work programme and shape it that way.
Yeah, I think that was purely indicative from what was said. That gives ideas of the type of thing. Okay, thank you for that, Steve. I've got Councillor Kemp next. Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I took part in the survey, and like many, I thought that the existing structure should stay. And the reason is that we don't really compare with a lot of neighbouring authorities. For one thing, we're a very big area. I think we're the 2nd largest area by size of any local authority. We're very diverse, not just the terrain, but the settlements. And members need to represent their areas. Issues need to come to the council. There are a lot of building projects as well. And in my opinion, that one scrutiny panel would be overloaded if it was to have the environment issues and community and regeneration development as well. Also, I do have concerns that there would be a new modus operandi of having daytime meetings, because as a borough council, we normally have evening meetings to increase participation, not create barriers to people at work. Also, I think that we ought to take account of the fact that members are elected to take ownership of issues, and I think that it should be members deciding what the structures are that they need. Working groups have been very successful, but then again, they don't meet in public. So we need to be accountable. We need to be front facing, open to what the public will see, and also the naming of these committees. Now, I don't wish to be critical, but I think to call something the Strategic Policy and Stakeholder Review Panel, we're a very plain speaking area here in Lynn, Norfolk, and I think folks can say, well, whatever's that? They know what an environment committee is, but they're going to say, they're up there in the clouds, those councillors. They're a bit nerdy, aren't they? So I think we need to think about what might be a turn off to people actually coming to the meeting. They won't know what it is, external. What does that mean? I don't quite see that these are a strategic fit with the practical work that we do as councillors. And also, I mean, it isn't quite right that all councils just have one scrutiny committee. I mean, the county has 11, and if we become a unitary, we will need to have more, because we will need to have committees for social care, both adults and children, transport, all sorts of things. And right at the moment, when so much work and money is going into the local government review issues, wrongly in my opinion, because I don't think that's needed either, it does seem a bit unnecessary to be thinking about restructuring committees here when we don't know how long they might exist. I think that our time, our officer time, would be better spent on concentrating on the issues, the concrete issues that matter to our residents, and not getting too process driven. I think we need to be very practical here, and think about how we best serve residents. So that's my opinion. I would be thinking of going for the maintain current arrangements, which is option 4. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. You said 11 scrutiny panels at county, and in my head, I'm trying to sit and work through my head what they all are. I'm probably on most of them.
Well, I just counted them. I
mean, you're also looking at
policy review as well.
You're looking at joint.
Yeah.
You're looking at joint arrangements like
Oh.
OSC and
Oh no, yes, all the ones in the
police and
list.
crime panel,
Yes.
which is actually districts as well.
Well, it is,
Yeah.
yes. So
there's quite a lot to get the teeth into.
Yes.
And we're talking about 2, but they're covering the whole county. Okay, that's fine. So next I've got Councillor Sayers,
Thank you, Chair.
working through the list.
In the spirit of friendly criticism, I just want to put out some thoughts on why I think we should not necessarily stay with the current model, but continue to consider it. And not to poo-poo Councillor Bearshaw's suggestions as to why it is a good. I just want to throw it in there as reasons for debate. I'd like to challenge whether the structure is actually the problem. The review identifies that policy development is underused, external scrutiny is missing, strategic working programme is lacking. None of these are problems that are caused by having 3 panels or 2 panels. These are cultural and resource issues. Are we restructuring to avoid addressing the harder question of are we actually doing scrutiny correctly, and should we be doing it differently?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very valid point, actually, because with support, the panels that we've got would probably work better. And when you look at the comment that Alex just made about the scrutiny arrangements at county, they have dedicated scrutiny officers and so on, don't they? So support officers. Thank you. Councillor Bone, next. Francis, please.
Chair, that's worked around quite quickly.
You're on the list.
I've got some thoughts regarding concerns. Is it a structural review that we need, or is it a functionality review? I think it's been previously brought up that we could be looking at better. I have concerns that each panel looks at probably similar subjects from a different view. E&C will probably look at from a community-based environment, where R&D looking at it for development and thing. I think we could achieve that. I also have concerns, obviously, when this peer review took place, that was before we knew about LGR. And I really am concerned that here could be a huge amount of officers' time going into restructuring something which, when this first came before, had the transformation before that, before LGR was announced, I thought it was a good idea. But this could change in a couple of years' time and complete. And I just think it's a complete thing. I do think the functionality and the performance of the panel committees can be improved with that. But I think now this is probably transformation for the sake of transformation, and I don't think that there's benefits. The likelihood, we don't know what's going to go on when the unitary elections come on. Who is it possibly there's going to be brand new people or thing. So I really do have some reservations at this stage. Obviously, when it first came up, I was really for it. And what would be the wider responsibilities? Of this, and what officers' time would it take to actually implement these changes at this stage? That is a big concern for me. So could I have some elaborate what concern? No, I appreciate a lot of work's already gone in.
Comment on that part of the how much work has been done thus far and how much more there would be to do to get the changes put in place, whichever option we went for.
To make the constitutional changes, not at all. That won't take much time. If we were to go with these proposals, or equally the one, or if it's just this one stage 2 panel model, the work's been done. So it's just a case of going through that. That would be no issue. And to touch on Councillor Sayers' point, I think where the officer time is going to come is no matter what option is decided by members, we need to do a bit of a transformation with the way that scrutiny works, and that forward work plan setting, and the scrutiny officer support, and the training, and kind of those behind the scenes matters to improve the quality of scrutiny. And I think what really came through in the review is that needs to be done no matter what, and that will need to be supported by Dem services and the monitoring officer function. There'll need to be a budget around training and getting that in, but that's going, I absolutely propose that happens no matter what, whether it's a 1, 2, 3 or whatever, because it's as was identified, you know, it is about the quality of the scrutiny, not necessarily just whether you have 1, 2 or 3 panels.
Thank you. I think next I've got Councillor Ware. I've got Alex, and Alexa. Yeah. Are they ganging up? Are they ganging up together up this corner of the room? Councillor Ware, please.
Yes, I'd just like to say that I understand the rationale and the objectives of the proposals, and I think actually with local government reform heading towards us, I think it's important that we do look at how we work, how we understand what our roles are, and I'm very interested in the idea of further understanding the role of scrutiny, training, etc. But this may be me, that I have failed to understand from page 14. So is it that at stage 2, May 26th, the newly named Regeneration and Community Panel ceases to exist? I think it does. And unless I've missed it, there's no mention of a chair and vice chair and the new panel. Will the chair, vice chair and all members then carry on their roles under the new name with the new remit?
So for those 2-panel model, it would be changes to the constitution, and then for annual council, they would have, it wouldn't be a carry on, it would just, annual council would have the usual appointment of chairs.
Yes,
And,
yes.
And that's set out in the terms of reference for Appendix 2, that would just get added into the constitution, and then it would go in the mix with all the other appointments that we do at annual council.
Yes, sorry, I had to miss the relevance of the May date. Thank you. Yeah, just also page 35 of the pack, the gap analysis is interesting, and again, I would suggest that training is equal among councillors as well as for chair and vice chair, because we're all often asked to sub, and I think training is very much needed. So thank you.
Thank you. I think next in order we've got Councillor Radcliffe. I've lost where she's in the room.
Yes.
Oh, she's down there. Sorry, Josie. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I looked at the information presented in the overview and scrutiny governance review carefully, and I don't believe that it makes the case for structural change to the panels. Referring to the points that are in the summary slides near the end, firstly, I note that the survey returned mixed results, but overall supported the status quo, those of us that are actually working in the system now. The local benchmarking I dispute the phrase significantly out of step in terms with other local councils. Looking at the councils across Norfolk at the same tier as us, the 7 councils, 4 of those do have just 1 panel, but 3 of those councils have 40 or fewer members. So proportionally, those members get a better chance to take part in the democratic processes. We have 3 panels, we have 55 members. 2 of the councils in Norfolk, that's Broadland and South Norfolk, the document shows they have 4 panels and they have fewer members on their councils than we do. So I dispute that we are significantly out of step with the other councils in Norfolk. And as we're preparing for LGR and future unitary councils, those are the councils we will be potentially sort of merging with, although they'll be our successor organisations, regardless of what councils in neighbouring counties structure. The other very significant point that I believe is missing from the local benchmarking is the outcomes of those councils. There's no indication whatsoever whether the councils with these different structures have better outcomes for their residents or worse outcomes for their residents. One example of this that I just learned this week, yesterday I was at the homelessness and housing delivery test group meetings, and we heard that at the local government conference, it became clear that our council is performing very well in terms of homelessness and housing support compared to other councils. So I don't see that there's in terms of outcomes for our residents, and surely that's what we need to make sure that we are measuring and delivering on. So I don't, and unless we've analysed the outcomes of the other councils, you can't. The benchmarking, just counting panels, doesn't give any indication of their success for their residents. A further point on the summary, it says that feedback from chairs, local group leaders and cabinet advocated for change. Well, they certainly advocated for improvements, and the slide before the summary, the gap analysis, gives an excellent overview of what improvements could be made, but nowhere in that the feedback that's included in the slide deck, the feedback from those bodies, advocates for a change in the structure. It advocates an improvement in the current performance. Also, on the next point on the summary, upskilling members for local government reorganisation and what scrutiny may be like. I can't see how that could be achieved by reducing our number of panels and reducing the opportunities for our members to take part in scrutiny, particularly if we are looking to train and improve the way that we do scrutiny. Surely that would be better to take forward to a successor organisation than experience that we have at the moment, which could be improved. Another point on the summary: member and officer resource. Well, as members, firstly, when we stood for election, we knew it would be evening meetings, so it would be a concern if there was there seems to be an indication from the benchmarking that there's daytime meetings are in the mix. That would be unfortunate for those of us who got elected, knowing what the commitments were. But as members, we get an allowance to compensate for our time, so we do want to come and engage with the democratic process. Officer resource, of course, the officers need time, but surely the time of council officers is to support the functions that the council has to deliver and the democratic processes. I mean, we have a team called Democratic Services. Surely their role is to support the democratic process. So my conclusion is that I can't see that the slide deck of the review as presented has made the case anywhere for that change would bring an improvement to the democratic process in this council or changing the outcomes for our residents. So I will be supporting option D to remain as we are until local government review comes along.
Yeah, thank you. And what my intention is, we've obviously got quite a lot of people still wishing to speak, but when we get to the recommendations, what I intend to do is obviously all voting panel members of the three joint panels will obviously get to vote for each individual option, and obviously depending on what we do with each individual option will really dictate whether or not we then need to go to the recommendations in the report, because if the one that's favoured thus far is the one that wins, well then obviously the recommendations don't need to be as they're outset in the document. I've got Councillor Parish next. We're about halfway down the list, so Councillor Parish.
I didn't realise it was so quick. I listened to the last councillor speak with awe, quite honestly. That was very well presented argument. Think about context first of all. The LGA review is mentioned as the starting point for all this. Well, I was involved with the LGA review more than most people, I think, at the time, for obvious reasons. And the conclusions that several of us reached about the LGA review was that we didn't like it very much. Not because of what the outcomes were, but because the way it was carried out, basically. And the meeting they visited, which led to their conclusions about lack of ability to scrutinise, I think, was a joint meeting which had more councillors present than I've seen ever since, quite honestly. It was, the entire room was full out there. It was absolutely full. And the certainly one of the topics under consideration was the Town Council for Kings Lynn. And it was at that point in time, there was uproar about Town Council for Kings Lynn. So it just shows you how time changes, because now we have a new committee, new panel, in order to discuss how to arrange the Town Council for Kings Lynn. So things do change. And what we're talking about is whether the way we scrutinise things should change. Well, as I said, I listened to the last speaker with awe and the analysis of what goes on in other councils. I do wonder in those other councils what the opposition is like, because another form of scrutiny is, of course, opposition. The opposition to an administration as the function of challenging the administration and keep them on their toes. And when I was leader of the opposition, we did it effectively enough to make a change in the constitution, which restricted the questioning time at council meetings. That's why we've got restrictions, because we caused so much mayhem at council, and council meetings went on so long that those restrictions are brought in. And then during my short reign as leader, the opposition were continuous in their questioning and their scrutiny of what the administration was doing. Now, if the current opposition did the same, then the questions about scrutiny might be different, because scrutiny takes place in that public meeting of the council chamber. Coming back to the panels situation, what I always liked about the panels, and when I joined the council years ago, well, so many years ago, I can't remember what it was. It wasn't that long ago compared to some of you. I was told I had to join 3 different panels or whatever, or at least 2, but 3 would be good, because that's where you get some experience of what the council does, and you sit and listen to what people are saying and so on. It involves you in the council business. So I do have some concern that if you reduce the number of panels, you reduce the opportunities for councillors to become involved. Now, there is a counter argument to this, because there are members of E&C, members of R&D, which are on the same panels and on the same panel as the principal scrutiny panel as well. So they're doubling up on jobs. So there's not as many councillors involved as you think there are. And there's also the problem of people not turning up to such meetings, and so you have subs, if you can get a sub, and you can't always get a sub. So it is quite difficult sometimes to fill adequately 3 panels, even though they're at different time. So there are counter arguments as to the impact of experience or ability for councillors to become involved. But I think if you lose the opportunity to do that, then you do reduce that potential experience. Several of the speakers so far have indicated that wanted no change. I don't think there can be any no change at all, because definitely there has to be improvements in the way scrutiny functions, and that training or whatever is done in order to improve that experience has to take place. And if we go to two panels, then there will have to be training in order to enable those two, well, certainly one of the panels, the panel 2, to function correctly. That will require more training than perhaps the panel 1, which exists at the moment. But certainly training will have to be taking place. But summing up, what we have to decide is not whether we need to change because LGA said we should change, But should we change because we, as councillors of this council, think it's the best thing to do? Is it better for this council to make changes? Is it better for this council to make changes to the current situation to improve what we do already? Is it better for this council to make changes more dramatically by reducing to 2 panels? And at the background of that, because of what comments have been made, will the changes that are made, if we decide to make changes, improve things significantly for both the council and for the people we serve, which is the public?
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah, you've shut me up. Thank you.
Well, I will do, yeah, because I don't know the rules apply the same as planning, but you definitely exceeded your 5 minutes.
You do all the time.
I know, I know, but it's up to the chair to rein people in, isn't it? I have got a huge list of people who want to speak, and some who want to speak for a second go, believe it or not. Councillor Keane, you're next, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got 2 or 3 concerns about this. My first one was when I first looked at the names of the panels, there was no mention of the environment on there. Now, I did talk to Election. She said, well, all right, that's just a name. We can stick environment in there. Smacks to me as environment is being pushed down the list of important items. And that really concerns me. It's one of the biggest challenges we face as a country, as a world at the moment, is environment. So I don't want to see that pushed to the back of the pile. So it does concern me from that side of things. The other thing I'm a great believer in is if it ain't broke, don't fix it unless you can improve it. To me, this doesn't look like it's going to improve things. I really don't see that. And looking at it and looking at some of the comments and some of the stuff that's been said tonight, this looks like a cost-cutting exercise. And I don't think we should be jeopardising scrutiny for cost-cutting. So I won't be supporting it. I should be supporting the stay as we are. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Vivapalli.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few thoughts. I thought the paper was very interesting, actually, and I agree with a lot of things in it. I think scrutiny does need to change. I think it needs to become more robust. We need to avoid duplication. I mean, this sentence about, you know, officers going through, what did they say, 7 different meetings to see one item through to decision. That's a nonsense. That sort of thing has got to stop. But I do agree with my previous colleagues who said, you know, is this the best way to go about it? Is reducing panels the best way to go about it? Or do we need to look at the core cause of why this is happening? Look at the structures, be critical, and kind of really examine why it is that all this time is being wasted. I also agree that we need more training in how to do scrutiny well, and especially with LGR coming up, I would absolutely welcome any training on scrutiny. And I think any officer resource that would have gone towards reorganizing these panels, shrinking them, make them into something else, you know, which we all then have to get used to or whatever, shrinking the number of members who are on them, would be better spent training us to do scrutiny better, giving feedback on panel performance, you know, real-time feedback. We could get external people, for example, to come back, sit in on our panels and then feed back to us about what we did well, what we didn't do well, what we could do better. That would be a really good use of time and resource, in my opinion. I was a bit surprised by Councillor Bayshaw's comment about R&D not having enough things to discuss at a time when there's so much of regen and development going on in West Norfolk. We've got massive amounts of, you know, projects, really ambitious plans in the pipeline, which I would have thought would have taken up no end of scrutiny time. You know, this is it's important that we examine the Guildhall, that we examine the Linsport redevelopment proposals properly in these panels. So I think we need to ask, why is it that they were struggling to find things to use their time with? It's a really important question, in my opinion. I completely agree with Councillor Coons as well. It is, you know, environment is so important, and it's good that we have a panel with its name in it. So my proposal would be, yes, let's change things, but within the existing 3-panel structures. Let's make them more robust, make them more watertight. I'm actually not a huge fan of joint panels. I think it does result in duplication. So let each panel have its own well-defined remit of what it does and include both policy development and scrutiny for the area that it looks at, would be my proposal. Now, Chair, one last thing. Unfortunately, I can't stay beyond 7. So if there is a vote after that, this would be my vote.
I think
for
I can
occupancy.
understand where you're coming from.
Thank you very
Absolutely.
much. Please take that into
Duly
consideration.
noted. Thanks. Yeah,
you.
absolutely. Who's next on my list? Ben Jones. Right down the far end then, didn't he?
Thank you, Chair. Initially, when the peer review came out, yes, I did agree we needed to look at things and scrutinise things better. But we didn't know about LGR at that point. We now know about it, and the potential of the panels that county currently have coming over to us as a unitary authority could mean we have even more panels. So to me, it seems like a lot of work now to only change it again later, because we've got extra panels that might also fit into other areas. And I think it's probably, at this point, it's probably a waste of time. We've only got another 2 years until the next elections anyway, that we wait and see what is going to happen with LGR before we even think about panels being shaken up, because some of the education might come under environment and communities, and some of the health panels that you have at county might come under that as well. So I think we're probably going to create a lot of work right now that we're going to probably redo again in 2 years' time, when we've got to look at what we're taking on as a unitary authority. So for me, right now, it's not worth the effort.
Absolutely agree with you on that score. Although we must, of course, remember that it's a brand new authority, and technically the shadow authority, when it's created, will be putting in place constitution and what its scrutiny arrangements need to look like. And actually it is going to be very determined whether it's 1, 2 or 3, because things like the Norfolk Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, even if you had 3 unitaries, would be sensible to look at the health service across Norfolk as a whole. So it might well be a joint arrangement, but that's not for us, that's for later on. So we're but duly noted. I've got Councillor Bondi now. Jim, please.
Yeah, I think my concerns are pretty similar to Ben's and Josie's. I think changing now with LGR coming very quickly, it takes time for big organisations to change and then everybody get up to speed. You know, it can take a year, year and a half. And if it takes a year, year and a half for us to change, we got then LGR in 6 months and then it's all change again. So I just can't see the point of it. Yes, we all welcome improved scrutiny and training on scrutiny, but I just can't see this as a good idea, trying to change now, getting everybody up to speed and getting used to the new system, and then as soon as that happens, we're up to speed and then we've got to change again. We don't know what's coming with LGR. Nobody does. We don't know what, whether it's going to be 3 or even 1. We still don't know this. So I can't see the point of changing the number of panels. I think we should just try and do a lot more training on scrutiny and improve that. Everybody would welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Now I've got my last person on my initial list, and then I'll say what Vivian often used to say at planning, which is new points only, please. So Councillor Hennigan, you're the last one on the first round.
Unfortunately, I don't think I am going to come up with any new points, Chair. I mean, I'll try and make my points briefly, because I think a lot of the things I'm going to say have been said already tonight. But I would like the opportunity to register my position on this.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've seen the argument that we aren't effectively scrutinising decisions, and this change is aimed at achieving improved scrutiny. I've listened to all the arguments, I've read all the papers, and I really don't see how reducing the number of panels is actually going to achieve that. And I really think we need to be looking at improvements in the current structures, as many people in this room have actually said tonight. And again, I think, as others have said, I don't really think now is that time for change. We've got no idea what LGR is going to be. I'm not sure why we should be changing our structure to prepare for LGR, because it'll be a completely different body to the one that we're currently sitting in. So I'm not really seeing how that would benefit us. And I'm also just concerned that we would end up rushing through decisions and not actually scrutinising things properly, because we've got, I mean, I was at E&C on Monday, as many other E&C members were, and we had an extremely heavy agenda. And, you know, it would worry me that sort of important things like that could end up being not given the attention that they need to if there's actually less committees.
Yes, and the flip side of that we had earlier with CPP, because we had a CPP meeting immediately prior to this joint meeting. I had to cut Councillor Dickinson off because we literally had got less than 5 minutes to get to recommendations, and everyone stood outside waiting for the next committee to come in. So, you know, giving fair due and fair time to what we do is also critical. So we don't want that happening.
Kate wants to come back.
Kate, you want to come in at this point on something, a point that's raised? I've still got two. I've still got Councillor Blunt on my number one list. So I missed him off my number one list. Councillor Blunt, sorry. I blame the Vice Chair.
I'll take the blame.
On a very rare occasion, I see myself agreeing with Councillor Kemp. We don't normally agree, but I'm sitting too close.
Make a note of it.
But in real terms, I think we've got too many other things to do and activities to sort out over the next 2 years, that this doesn't need to be done. I don't think it's the right time to do it, but I do think there is some changes that we could make, because even within the system we have, I think what the current system is driven by the cabinet agenda. And I think we should be looking at some of the things that we saw on the possible list of meeting subjects. We could do that now. We could the scrutiny. Let's talk corporate. The scrutiny committee, the CPP. We could sit on that and decide on the items we wanted at the start of the year and actually go through that, rather than just pick up everything that's on the work list from everybody and deciding we'll do that. We did one tonight. We've done every time for the last 18 years. With nothing new in it, but it was an item on the agenda. Why? Because it was on the cabinet report. So I think there is an opportunity here to rethink how we do the agendas that we take through to panels. Our panels, I think, do a brilliant job. And I've sat on several panels, both as a member and as a portfolio holder. And I feel that they give really good rethink to some of the issues that we have. And I think we need to just slightly tweak how we set those agendas. So I should be voting for how to stay as the same, but with amendment to how we create agendas. And also, I would like to add one other thing. We do need training all the time. So I think that is an option that we should take up.
I can't remember the last time scrutiny training was offered to members.
No,
to be fair, but then I've been here a long while.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Richard. That's all the first term people. Kate, I'm going to come to you next. Then I'll come to Alistair as portfolio holder. And Angie, sorry, I'd missed your hand earlier on, had I? Or you just want to come in? Oh, okay. Well, we'll put you on the list.
Yeah.
We'll put you ahead of the second question, people. The second mention, people. Kate first, then Alistair.
So I think it's useful just to share a few thoughts from an officer perspective, and I think Councillor Blunt, you were really helpful in terms of something that was certainly a perception and a reality when I started here, which is that divvying up of the cabinet agenda. In terms of at the moment, that is predominantly what the panels are focused on. And absolutely, there are items on that cabinet agenda that absolutely need to be scrutinised and add value to that decision-making process. But there are also items that go to cabinet that perhaps don't need that level of scrutiny because they're fairly black and white, obvious matters that are going to scrutiny. And by virtue of doing that, what you have, I believe, missed is that opportunity to externally scrutinise what is happening in the borough. So what perhaps your housing associations might be going up to, what's been happening with the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, for example. That is an absolute gap that is missing from scrutiny. It is unfortunate that tonight you've got caught up with a number of panels in terms of the proposal to go from 3 to 2. But effectively, that proposal is simply saying that actually there is an opportunity to have one panel that still does all of that internal scrutiny, be it have a bit more of a strategic view about what are those items in cabinet where scrutiny can add value, and what perhaps are those items that are the day-to-day business that don't need scrutiny in the same way, versus then bringing forward that opportunity to do the external scrutiny. So what is happening in Kings Lynn and West Norfolk, that these members can bring in external people to scrutinise effectively. So I think there's just something to think there. There's also been a lot of talk around LGR and the impacts of LGR. In terms of the officer view, there is a huge amount of additional resource we have had to put in, first in terms of submitting the 3 unitary business case, but also what we are going to need to do in terms of getting ready for the new unitary authorities. And so some of this is also around making sure that where you are using officer resource for scrutiny, it is where you are adding value to the process and the decision making. And somebody gave an example of reports that officers are having to present over 7 times. That is a factual point. So we have panel sifting, don't we? We have cabinet sifting, we have panels, and then it goes on to cabinet and then on to council. So there are officers that are repeating those conversations in many different places. And it's just something to be, I think I would just ask you to be mindful of. So it is a good question to say, why change now? Because LGR is happening in the future. But some of these proposals are also around making sure that you get the most effective use out of the officer resource that is available, when as officers we are being pulled in many different directions that weren't in place even with the peer review that you had a couple of years ago. So just a few thoughts from me.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. That's helpful. I'd be interested if you got the same peer review people back here and said, and in the hindsight of we now know LGR is going to happen, whether they would say leave it alone or what they would do. Alistair, it's your portfolio. I'll come to you, and I've got actually 1 or 2 new first-time speakers on who want to speak. And then I'll really give a hard stare at the second-time speakers, and then we'll have some voting. Alistair.
Jeff, if I may, could I suggest you take those first-time speakers first? I find it very useful. I'm here in listening mode.
So I've got Councillor Dickinson and then Councillor Collop.
Thank you, Chair. Quick point really, because I don't want to repeat what other people have said. But this whole matter was considered by the Constitution Informal Working Group. And as a member of that, I can say that we did spend an awful lot of time looking at this issue, whether we should keep 3, whether we should reduce it down. And one of the things that we spent a lot of time on was identifying issues with the current scrutiny process. And I'm not really, I apologise if I've missed it in the report, but I'm not seeing the findings of the CIWG on that particular aspect in terms of how we can improve the scrutiny process, because it doesn't, almost doesn't matter whether we've got 1, 2, 3 or 20. If the process is not working, then it's not going to work for however many there are. So apologies if I've missed it, but I feel as though we've not brought forward those issues and solutions that we discussed at that working group.
So Alexa, how was that picked up from the work that was done in the informal working group to end us up where we are tonight, please?
So in the background papers and within the report, there was reference to the Constitution Worker Group deep dive that we did. And I think the only points that haven't been explicitly set out in the report were the comments around items slipping a lot and getting into that culture where you've got your forward work programmes and then routine you're told that slipped, that's going to the next one. And whilst it's not explicitly set out in there, what would be expected is that annual forward work programming, and then a lot more of the focus through the year on everyone coming together in workshops and pre-briefs, and then the scrutiny officer support. So there would be a dedicated officer, which, like I said, would be that conduit between the scrutiny and the executive, would be there to ensure that there is a person who is challenging back on when items are going on the agenda, and being realistic and managing expectations. Because at the minute, I think there's not much structure around that. And I'd say that was the one bit that wasn't picked up explicitly, but it was there implicitly, of that we would definitely need to address that point.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Collop there. You're next.
Thank you. Just going back to something that the Chief Exec said. Oh, sorry. Just going back to something the Chief Exec said regarding the E&C panel. When we spoke about the cemeteries, I asked if we could have an external body come and speak to us, and that happened, and that was a very good debate. It's just something I'd like to add there. Thank you.
Yes, no, that's exactly right, and that sort of getting in some external input sometimes is very relevant to the decisions that we take, and have adjusted our route, I think, as a result of that. We're now looking at a working group. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I've got Councillor Everett next. Steve. Understand? Oh, no, well, I haven't got the standing order of 34 people yet, Steve. Yes, yeah. So Alistair, do you want to speak before the 34, or do you want to hear the 34? Because I'm happy either way. So I'm looking at Judy, whether she's standing order 34 and whether she wants to speak as well. Yeah, we could be here all night discussing.
I just going to add a bit of context, Chair, from because there's two parts to this. There's the executive as well, and I've hardly talked about that. So I'll give you a view of that. And frankly, as the leader of the council, I was pretty political expediency is where I started with this. Leave it alone. It's I've got plenty to do. Actually, that's not an adequate place to be. It's too important for that. And particularly, I was brought up short by our CEO, who said, "You bang on all the time about taking this council, making sure that the transition to unitary works and is as efficient as possible, and you actually make yourself very unpopular in multi-council meetings, stressing that point time and time again." It's now getting across because I think it's hugely important, and particularly with the county council, who have a cultural difficulty with it. I don't say that from any political point of view, purely a community-based point of view. They need to get with the programme. There's going to be a new authority, whatever shape it takes. So that's hugely important, and preparing our staff for all that. So the point that was put to me is, why would you leave members out of it? And I think there's a really important point there, that whether you like it or not, the structure that the new authorities move to is not going to look anything like how we scrutinise now. Now, I don't have a view on that. That's a matter for you, because the view I took was scrutiny is a matter for scrutiny. So this report is pretty loosely written. So it serves exactly as it has done tonight to stimulate debate. It's been really useful. There's clearly a resistance to structural change for structure for its own sake, and I would share that, obviously. What I would make a plea for is to think about the core purpose of a lot of what you do, which is holding the executive to account. And it suits me very well if I'm not held to account, but it doesn't, does it? Because my role is to serve the community. So if I turn up here and I'm embarrassed at a panel and it saves money, or it modifies a bad idea into a good idea, great. That's what we should be doing. But it doesn't feel like that. At the moment, cabinet members are invited, and they're invited to speak. And I'm not suggesting that cabinet members should be allowed to dominate. That would be completely wrong. What I think you should do from an executive point of view is demand that questions are answered. Because all too often I sit in a scrutiny meeting, and it's a bit of a quiz question for the officers. And the political questions are also put to officers. And it's really important that in my view, and I am giving you the executive view, not to try and persuade you of it, but to provide context, that it's really important that, right, we've heard from the officers about the information. Now, can you explain to us why you took that decision, or you're proposing to take, based on that information? You know how to do this. There's a lot of very good scrutiny goes on. Let's not get the idea that this is here because scrutiny doesn't work. It's not. It's here because scrutiny could be strengthened, in my view. External, all of that, that's for you. But I'm just talking for the scrutiny of the executive. I think if you can strengthen holding the executive to account, that would be a really useful addition. That doesn't look like structure. That's over to you. And let's not forget, Councillor Devapalli was concerned about missing her vote, and I'll shut up so she might not. But let's not forget, this is a council decision. So whatever proposal I put to you, and I've got a lot to think about after tonight, it will be a council decision. And I'd suggest it should be the freest of votes, that people should vote as they see fit. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. Now, I'm minded that we've got standing order 34 people who want to speak. We've got people who've already spoken who want to speak again, which we've got a little list that we've built up. But we have covered a lot of the same ground from quite a number of different folks. So standing order 34 people, you've got the right to speak at this meeting. Have you got anything additionally to add to the discussion? Councillor Everett, you're one of them.
No, it's just me basically repeating what everybody else has said in agreement.
Okay.
So of status quo.
Absolutely, thank you. And Councillor Conningham online.
Yeah, good evening. I thought I was actually part of this joint panel, to be honest.
You are, but not unless you're in the room. Not unless you're in the room. They haven't changed the law yet.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think it's a really interesting discussion. I've listened quite carefully, and I personally, in summary, would favour the status quo, because I can't quite see the point of going down what will be a complicated redesign for something which will not have, cannot have any permanence. So that's my input. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Helpful. Colin, you're standing order 34.
Yeah, well,
what
I'd like to query is how we will select panel of members in future. Is it going to be this rather curious proportional representation, or is it going to be more democratic?
Well, they'll be politically proportioned and dealt with by full council as they are previously. We're not proposing to change that part of the way things work. It'll be the sheet comes out and group leaders will have had a chance to input who they want to put onto what based on the allocation. I don't think that's proposing to change. So I don't think we'll necessarily, I'm pretty certain that's the case, Alex. We're not proposing to change that system irrespective of what.
Definitely be proportional.
That's part of the constitution. Okay, second people whose names I've got on the list. Do you want to add anything further or new? Councillor Bearshaw, you've waited patiently on your second go. Thank you.
Yes, Chair, and I almost wish I'd brought this up at the first time, but I wanted to hear what Evan had to say before I did. So, CPP earlier, how many meaningful agenda items did we have? One. If we didn't have this afterwards, would we have half the councillors here? We probably wouldn't have done. So what I'd like to do is actually propose an option 5, which is a bit of a compromise, and that would be the 2 panels with R&D and E&C amalgamating and CPP as a separate. But I'd like to keep the same remit they've got now. External scrutiny is already in the remit of the panels, hence Transport Working Group. But I'd actually challenge the chairs to do more working groups, more spin-offs, to take some of that work away. And I am going to go over a point that's already been said. It boils down to staff resource. The reports slip, even when you plan them 9 months in advance, they still slip because we haven't got the staff to constantly turn up. You're nodding, because how many times have we been in there at the joint panel meetings when we've been scrabbling for work because it slips? And you can put pressure on and say, I'll take the report now. Officers have still got to prepare something. It still takes time. Yeah. It boils down to resource. So we either stay as we are and get more resource, or we change. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Steve. I mean, as a proposal, which you're obviously entitled to make, do you have a seconder from members of the joint panel? You're a member of which panel? Sorry, Judy. You're on CPP? Of course you are, yeah. Those in favour of Steve's Yeah, Steve, just go back over that again so that everyone's got it.
So amalgamate R&D, E&C, but keep CPP the same with the same remit for all the panels now. So just combine your R&D, ECC remit, and then keep CCP as it is. I see that as R&D and E&C look forward, CPP looks backwards at decisions that were made.
So ultimately, you're still saying that we will end up with 2 panels, but the 2 panels will have the combined 2 panels will have all of the remit of both of the panels doing what they do now, the way they do it now, and well, that's and that would include what in terms of
exactly what the remit includes now.
Okay.
And then we're not doing a huge change. We're basically doing what we are now, but with 2 panels.
Okay, so Julian seconded that. Because that's different, it's an amendment from what we've got on the table. I will take a vote on that as a proposed and seconded amendment. I'm not proposing that we debate that because I think it's a straight choice. We either want to go that route or we don't want to go that route. Those in favour of Steve's amendment, please show. Steve and Julian. And those against that. So that's lost. Sorry, Steve. Nice try, but didn't. Yeah, wasn't accepted. So now I will move on to the recommendations that we've got before us. Now, oh, sorry. Oh, you're on the second name. Oh, you're on the second list. And so is Councillor Kemp. Apologies. I'm moving on too far. And Richard wants to be on that list as well. Councillor Sayers, Councillor Kemp, Councillor Blunt.
Thank you, Chair. And we've discussed the justification, and I think we're fairly agreed that the justification of going to 2 is not there. But now I want to address on the practicalities of a hypothetical and what proposals in that practicalities we could adopt in our 3 panel system that we've got. Firstly, on the whole point of an external panel is to get involved in policy development at the formative stages. The Cabinet forms its own proposals.
David, I'd hate to curtail anybody because I think you know what you're going to start to try and do now is redesign the Constitution on the hoof. And
no,
there's a bit of a danger
in
trying to redesign the Constitution.
I want Cabinet to be aware of some practical things that the proposals in the protocol that has been formed.
Yes.
There are some very valid points in there that I think the Cabinet will still want to bring into us as a scrutiny group, will want to apply. But there are, I think, some failings in that protocol that we need to possibly address so that when Cabinet discuss it at their Cabinet meeting, they've got them on the table and can think about them and
so
how they
would a good recommendation that encompasses what you're looking to do, rather than just try and sort it out tonight, refer part of what we'll have a vote on what options we have available to us, and then as an addition, and then depending on the outcome of those, the recommendations will be different to what we see in our agenda, and one of them might well be to pass back to the Constitutional Working Group, that they look at those points, and that at that time you're more than welcome to attend under Standing Order 34 and bring forward those items that you would like to see included. Because of what we've heard, yes, there are items that we would like to see added to the way that we work, and I, for one, I've always been an advocate for dedicated scrutiny support officers, but if we ask for one, there isn't a budget for it. It's an extra, potentially an extra post. It would make scrutiny work better. In my opinion, it would. What I've seen of the support I get at county compared to the support that we get for scrutiny here, it's different. They've got a dedicated support.
In your role as chair, I will obviously defer to your ruling, but if I would be allowed to speak, just these few points. Then
yes, make a few brief points because we've got a lot of people have already had a say.
I appreciate that.
And we had a job to do, which was based on the recommendations that we got. We want to get.
I will engage with the working group.
We want to get the best out of them, don't we? So please, if you could, yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Councillor Kemp, very briefly, please.
Very briefly, yes. Reviewing everything, I think we have a good constitution. It has good checks and balances. And one thing that does need to be improved is the working with the executive, the listening process and revising. I think that's really important.
Yes, and often we have scrutiny items or agenda items on the various panels, and the appropriate portfolio holder isn't there to be scrutinised, and that always can't be helped. And there isn't always a substitute appropriate portfolio holder sent in replacement, and that's happened since year dot because people have holidays and whatever else. But to be accountable, you've got to be here to face the music, haven't you?
Willing to change sometimes, willing to reassess.
Councillor Blunt.
I'd just like to make a recommendation for amendment to option 4, which is to stay the same. But I'd include a couple of or 3 points. One, that we accept the structure as it is across all the scrutiny panels, but we actually adopt a review of how the agendas are generated, and we give that some thought before we get to the next year or in the next sort of short time scale. I secondly would actually say that we must introduce a training programme for all members of all panels, similar to what we have in the planning committee. And if you don't actually attend, you don't get on your role in the panel. And thirdly, actually, I would recommend I like the role of joint panels because in theory they do save work and a lot of time for officers and for members. I think the idea of joint panels is a good idea.
So maintaining the current arrangements, I mean, we already have joint panels and let's face it, we only have them when we need to have them, but that's how the arrangement is now. So we wouldn't need a recommendation to change that. It would be part of option 4. Yes.
I would like to second Councillor Blunt's proposals.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. I mean, having that as a proposal on the table means I haven't necessarily got to go through all the options, because if we get a vote through on that, then the other options obviously by default don't need a vote, will they? Because we will have decided. Thank you. Very helpful, Richard. Very helpful. Right. That is the proposal that we vote for option 4, which is maintain the current arrangements, but include the request that we have routine or ongoing training for panel members, that we have an formal arrangement put in place that deals with how the agendas are structured, and we have already have a meeting that's started but didn't really have a formal basis, so we can more formalise that. And the last one is part of the status quo because we already have joint panels. Thank you. We'll have a show of hands in favour of that proposal, which is an amendment to option 4. Of those votes. Anybody abstaining or anyone voting against? No, in that case it definitely is unanimous. And that's option 4 plus. We'll refer to that as. Cabinet can make of that what they will. They will then forward that on to full council, and we'll all have a say in a discussion again. Fortunately, the fact we've had so much input from people tonight will mean that council debate goes a lot smoother, and hopefully Cabinet will take heed of what we've told them.
Sorry?
You may make one comment, Alistair.
Just one small point, Chair. If at an appropriate stage you could turn your thoughts to how you would like substitution of Cabinet members to work. It's been a perennial issue. I'd appreciate your thoughts on that. I've been up now for about 30 hours today and yesterday in order to be here, and I'm not at my doubtful best, but it would be useful to have a view of how that, because it often doesn't happen very well if the appropriate portfolio holder isn't here, but it's useful to have guidance from what the committee's joint panels would like.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, Alistair. I mean, we had Ian C on Monday. Obviously, I think one of the reports was Simon's, one of the reports may have been yours, I can't remember. Appreciate that neither of you were available. And there were other Cabinet members present but there's no formal arrangement to say, well, the leader's not here, the deputy leader's not here, who you know, who's in the firing line for these questions. It's a very valid point. I think as leader, I had to attend every panel every week, whenever they were, just you know, to cover any absent portfolio holders. But anyway, thank you all for your input. It's been a mammoth session. I think meeting closed. I don't think we've got anything else to do. Next joint panel, who knows when it will be.